Now, what is an event? An event is something that is untimely. It breaks the continuity of history. It is unpredictable. But being untimely in French is intempestif, which means it comes on top. No one expected it, and it could have gone without it. Intempestif means that it's a bit bothersome, that it bothers historian that something happened and they don't know what to do with it. Right? And that's why May 68 has no explanation. But there are millions of explanations. Right? It's been explained to death. And what Deleuze would say, an event is not important for its causes, but for the possibility that it opens up. And the possibility may not be used on the spot. May 68 was the beginning of something, but also the end of 68. After 68, the French society closed off again, even more, hardened even more because it had been threatened by collapse. See what I mean? So you have in some sort of schizophrenic outburst, and then there was the stop that was given to it, and the French society immediately invented ways of making sure that it would never happen again, right? And that's the situation till now. But it could happen somewhere else without being connected to it. See? That's why there is some resonance that is established after the fact between something like the Arab Revolution, which happened, and the French Revolution, which didn't happen. But there was also communality in the sense that the May 68 was made of hard lines and soft lines and abstract lines. The abstract line, we could say in that case, was that Cohn-Bendit and the group of March 22, who just were simply anarchistic and tried constantly increase the stakes, right? Saying, okay, any sort of disturbance would be good in the French society of the time. It is true that when I left France in early 68, it was a very stifled, boring kind of a society. There was a big line in Le Monde titled, France is bored, right? In January 68, France is bored. That was the main title of Le Monde. When I left for Australia, right, I was sure nothing would happen, and unexpectedly, the untimely happened. What we had all expected to happen in the time in the aftermath or during the decolonization and Algerian war happened like a few years later, and very differently, because decolonization was down, consumerism was there. Was it a reaction to consumerism? Yes, cars were burned down, TVs were burned. It may be that. It is the fact that it anticipated post-Fordism. The idea of post-Fordism wasn't there yet. You had the intellectual, but there was not even the idea that there was a service sector that was replacing production. We don't know why it happened. What is more important is that it opened a number of possibilities that may be picked up by anyone else. Another assemblage could take it from there. You see? That's what Marx did after all when he studied the Commune of 1871. From the idea of the Commune, he invented the communist movement, right? But it was deliberate in the sense that the Commune had been exterminated by the Versaillais, by the army, but they survived long enough to show that you can survive without, that a class can take over, right? And even if they were punished for it, it gave the idea that there was possibly a communality, or such an idea as communism, right? So now, after that, the Soviet Union was created. The Soviet Union was a threat to the countries that were around, so they cordoned it off. And inside the Soviet Union, the positive way of changing society was to exterminate 5 million peasants, thanks to Lenin. And the negative way was you had to protect yourself against the pressure that was exerted by the line of bourgeois society which felt threatened by it. Then you had to infiltrate them to the Communist Party, etc., etc. So another machine, another kind of assemblage was put in motion and became harder and harder to the point that we had a position between the Soviet Union and the United States. You know? So within, you know, the communist movement had positive aspect and negative aspect, but it was infiltrated by the Comintern, you know, and there were pressures were made on people in the own country to spy for the Soviet Union, you know, for good reasons and bad reasons. You know, it's a whole historical analysis that is to be made. But for Deleuze, it doesn't matter. Something happened, you know. Something happened, which was the revolution of 1917. It opened up possibles, and immediately they were seized because there was the revolution, the Spartakist revolution in Hungary, right? And there was a sense in Europe that revolution was imminent. Marx thought that it would happen in Germany, but it didn't happen in Germany. He thought that Germany was the one which was already following the notion of the various stages of development. The next was Germany, but nothing happened in Germany. The reverse didn't happen because the labor movement in Germany was totally exterminated by the Nazis, using the notion of socialism to impose a virulent form of nationalism, right? So all this is very complex. But for Deleuze, of course, they're interested from that. You know? But they're interested in the fact that what could make people desire, you know, go into the direction of something that is repressive, right? And in the case of Nazism, is that he gave a lot of people power that they didn't have before. You know, people were dispossessed before, but by belonging to the party, they suddenly had power over the others. Same way we saw in Nietzsche that if someone owes you something, if you can impose yourself upon them by taking, you know, opening part of their body and all that, you have like the pleasure of being in a position of power. The Nazism won over in Germany because it seemed to give everyone at all levels of the hierarchy a power that would be derived from them, you know, from a bloc, the head of a bloc, the head of the doctors, the head of the, you know, everyone was, power was being divested and distributed throughout society, so that, you know, the Nazi movement itself was very chaotic. It was not at all a state. It was made of various institutions and were all joking for power, right? And Hitler was not really totally in charge. He was trying to maintain the possibility of harmonizing institutions that were, you know, fighting each other by erecting himself as some sort of arbiter and object of fascination, right? So fascism was everything but an organized, deliberate construction. It was an answer to the Bolshevik threat. And very soon, with the help of the industrialists, Hitler made a pact with the industrialists. Economically, they were near bankruptcy, and Hitler went to them and he said, look, if you give me power, I'll give you the war, right? So fascism from the beginning was a regime for war. It's the only way it could maintain itself is to build up weapons, and the only way you can use weapons, you can justify for the expense of the weapon was to use them. So basically, at that time, everything became predictable. It was a matter of timing. And that's not what Deleuze said. When the war started, everyone knew it was coming, right? But everyone was hoping it wouldn't happen. Now, when '68 happened, no one had any idea it was going to happen, and the same for the Arab Revolution. And that's why what makes them untimely, and it's another history. It's a history of accidents. In the same way we saw, you know, the police itself is an accident. Accidents are not all revolutionaries. They are untimely. It was untimely that prison would be invented and would proliferate and become a universal measure, right, of everything, right? But that's what it is. The events are never, once an event happens, it opens that possible they can be picked up in most unlikely way. Yeah? And that's it. That there is another history that is parallel to the linear history, which is the history of untimely events. And there might be a connection between an event and another, and this event could be like by resonance, like in '68. '68 was like an outburst of energy coming from extremely different places. The people the East Bloc rebelled against communism, and people on the West Bloc rebelled against capitalism, and yet it all happened at the same time. So you see the very example of the fact that the specificities can be connected even if each of them is different and doesn't seem to be it didn't seem possible that they would have connected, but they did, right? And why, we don't know. But assemblages were made for a while and then broke down afterwards, right? And the same way in each of these events, you could analyze it, you can analyze the Arab Revolution in the process right now, by seeing the various lines that are being developed. And that's another analysis of Deleuze, the idea of the lines, right? We talked about it. Within the 68 was the abstract line of the pure anarchists, the line of the various leftist intellectual, etc., the intellectual class. That would be the subtle line, because they lean towards the left, but at the same time they are not anarchists, for instance, right? And then there is a hard line of the communist and the state. And the communists, the hard line, want to maintain its privilege, and in the middle of the May 68, the communists negotiate with the government to put a stop of 68. And when the negotiation doesn't work, then they throw their might into it, but change the balance of the 68 and end it, right? The same is happening in Egypt, I believe, where the various line, the abstract line of the abstract connected to the electronic, etc., create an abstract line with toppled over the state that existed there, but they're lines that are being worked, and some composition between the line is being worked out, willingly or unwillingly, so that another form of power, another form of state is there that would replace the one that was before. Simply, it could be some appearance of democracy, or degrees of democracy, instead of being a straightforward dictatorship, right? But it's up to grab, right? We don't know. The revolution often possibles, but the possibilities, the possible are going to be exploited right away, or it could be exploited somewhere else, or exported, resonate somewhere else. We don't know. This is the alternative history, right? It is not a history of historian, but it is a history of something that is always in the making, and could disappear for a year, for 10 years, for half a century. We don't know the way it will happen. So of course there is something more deliberate in Baudrillard's idea, because you create a possibility for deliberately create a possibility for a confrontation to be made, right? And that's what he did with Foucault, trying to create a confrontation. He was in a position coming from very different place, overlapping some of Foucault's own ideas. He was in a position to push it to a confrontation, which was mixed in the sense that in confrontation there is prestige. Confronting Foucault was a certain way of getting some of the power of Foucault, on his side, and it was part of it, and he admitted that there was a good deal of that in that. But at the same time, it was a certain way of testing Foucault to see how far he goes, not trying to diminish him, but and that's what is important in Baudrillard's type of confrontation, that you don't debase your challenger. You give your challenger as much as he deserves, or they deserve. You see? So he said, when you start reading Forget Foucault, it starts with an apology, a eulogy of Foucault. Your work is incredible. The rhetoric that you use is admirable in every respect. The analysis, the argument you follow is really totally stunning. But you don't go far enough. You could be even more stunning. You could be even more operative than you are. He escalates the stakes, right? But again, it is not like like the class struggle where you have to say to denounce the bourgeois. But there's the only sarcastic, or no, taunting of Foucault is Foucault's theory is that of a dinosaur, right? Why? Because that's very much what Baudrillard develops, the idea that Foucault now has come to a point where he takes a shadow limb for reality. Right? He hasn't gone far enough on the spiral. Right? He takes the phantom for the power. Right? Power has become photomatic. Power is now dispersed throughout society. Power is basically disappearing, but Foucault is still hanging on, not in a simple way that Baudrillard presents, but still hanging on to the idea that such a power exists and that has replaced the state. Right? So that's what the confrontation is. Again, the confrontation involves Deleuze and Guattari in many ways, because the whole conception of power in Foucault is indebted to Deleuze and Guattari, and the analysis of power in Foucault is very much the same. That power goes through metamorphosis and transformation. Power is something fluid. Power constantly has to be defined in a very specific way, in a very specific time, in a very specific space. You know, but it's something that could migrate and turn into something else, right? So it's a fluidity, as much fluidity as Foucault can allow.